Filmed before a live studio audience.
Alright, take 3. I seem to have picked up a cough from somewhere, which is causing me issues making a recording. So, housekeeping. Tabletop is still looking for additional players, so if any of you know any adult performers, cam girls who are into nerdy shit, maybe drop them a line and ask them to get in touch with me, or let me know who they are. Obviously, of course, this being naughty stuff, you may not wish to comment publicly or make your suggestions. If so, you're welcome to drop me a line privately at grim@post-mort.com, and I will put them in touch with the appropriate people. Okay, let's get into it then. Other stuff, other housekeeping will probably come up from comments people have made. I reviewed Maelstrom. Quite a lot of people shared their memories of playing the game back in the day, or having the books back in the day. Me, never saw a copy in the wild. Don't know why. Maybe distribution was bad, or it was put somewhere I wouldn't find it in bookshops. I don't know, but it seems like it holds a similar place to the one Dragon Warriors held for me in a lot of people's hearts. I think it would maybe have been more appealing to slightly older kids than I was when it came out, perhaps. Maybe that's why. Anyway, I fell down a rabbit hole of research after that review, so I thought I might as well share my results with you. If you wanted to include realistic firearms in your RPGs, the main issue is the loading time. So, according to my research, there were basically quite wide estimates over how long it would take to reload such a weapon. So matchlocks take between 1 and 2 minutes to load. I'm assuming the lower bound would be if you're, particularly proficient or trained in the weapon, and the upper bound, if not, if this was the first time you'd seen one. Flintlocks take between 15 and 30 seconds to load. Light crossbows, 15 to 30 seconds. Heavy crossbows, the kind that need winding with a windlass, 60 to 90 seconds. So, yeah, if you want realistic weapons in your fantasy games of this type, now you know. Probably worth making the damage a bit higher, if that is the case, because that is a lot of turns in D&D terms, isn't it? Of course, how people coped in the past was they made guns with multiple barrels, or they slung, several guns around themselves. A brace is 2, by the way, for pheasants and for pistols. On my Across 1,000 Dead Worlds post hoc playthrough, Jack Fetch says, loving this series, looking forward to the next episode. Well, it is still quite intensive to do, though I try to do it in one take for the most part, and keep in the times when I stumble over the words a little bit to save time. But adding the audio effects still takes time, even if it's just a single image that I present. So it is a lot of work, and the hits aren't great, but the kudos are. So it doesn't necessarily seem to attract people a huge amount to watch. Though as a format for presenting other single-player games, I think this might work. I'll probably do at least one more episode and see how that goes. The thing is, though, is it a really good representation of solo gaming? Because I am taking my gaming experience and then passing it through my writer's experience to create a weird sort of hybrid that I then present as a radio play. So it's like 2 or 3 steps removed from the experience of actually playing the game, perhaps. I am enjoying it more than I thought. I think that's because I'm a forever GM. So it's a good way of kind of flexing your games master skills, your improvisational skills. But I'm still not completely sold. But there you go. Paul Berry says, sorry to hear you're feeling bad. Thanks for soldiering on and producing this great work. This is cracking good stuff. So thank you. Yeah, I had some not great health news this past week. So because of the high blood pressure problems that nearly killed me a couple of years ago now, I guess, there is damage to other parts of my circulatory and vascular systems. And my heart has been a little bit damaged as well. It's nothing super duper serious, but it does mean that I have to make yet more lifestyle changes. On the upside, they're changing my medication, so I shouldn't be hobbling around quite so much with swollen legs as I have been. But it was more important for me not to die than to be able to move around easily. So, silver lining, I guess. Hopefully I can get things under control. It's basically a whole bunch of extra risk factors. It doesn't normally affect my day-to-day much more than it already did, so I'll be okay. It's just depressing. You know, kind of feels like my body is gradually falling apart around me. But I'll be fine. But thank you for all the good wishes for the people I've already told. And if this is new to you, I just didn't want to say anything necessarily to everybody while I was so bummed out about the whole thing. So I just made a couple of oblique comments on Twitter and Facebook, and that was about it. Because, you know, it's the way social media is these days. Most people don't see what you say, so another silver lining, I guess. Bernaf says, Carla is such a GPT-style AI. That's because I use ChatGPT. It's wonderfully dystopian. An incredibly personality-bereft voice agent. Seems like just the kind of crap that would be foisted off on disposable agents sent to trigger the traps. High-tech enough to placate the rubes and cheap enough to turn a decent profit for whomever sells them. Yeah, probably. We may well end up with things like Carla. Well, I guess we already have with AI girlfriends and things. But yeah, I used ChatGPT. I told it to create a character of a Jungian psychiatrist who is an artificial intelligence, so that's recursive. Then I used 11 Labs to replicate Rani's voice from Elden Ring, and then I applied a filter to that to make it sound more robotic, because other than stumbling occasionally over the pronunciation of words, AI is now often virtually indistinguishable from people, which is obviously no good and quite confusing if you're doing a radio play and you want to emphasize that something is actually, you know, a robot. So modern problems require modern solutions, I suppose. But yeah, it was a deliberate choice to use AI to represent the AI and to give it an AI voice, and then to make it sound more AI than the AI actually made the AI sound. Oi oi. On the Dragonbane Bestiary, Will in New Haven says it would be less expensive in PDF form, but then snobs like you wouldn't review it. It does look interesting. Will, I am very, very tired of your constant passive-aggressive comments. Right, the material that you sent me to review was in PDF, which means it ends up in the big folder of PDFs on my computer, which almost never get looked at, right? Whereas a physical book lurks there in the background, glowering at me until I get around to reviewing it. So if people want things reviewed, hard copy is the best way to do it. And it's because I am fed up of the fact that I am disappointing people like you who send me things by not getting around to PDFs that I have instituted that hard copy policy. Also, because you keep leaving these passive-aggressive messages about once a month, what you sent me was not very good, and I didn't want to put you off either. That's part of the reason I never went through it and reviewed it. It was just not very good, and I didn't want to bum you out, but you keep being so hostile and annoying and passive-aggressive that, well, here we are, right? And I'm low on patience this week. On the Black Sword hack, though, there were similar comments on Candela Obscura. Van Davis says, you don't do a whole lot of research into the items you review, eh? Well, no. I kind of see the point of reviewing a book to be reviewing the book, right? The content that is presented in the book as is, not presenting, hours of research into every nook and cranny of the book and the things it presents, because that is stuff that exists beyond and outside the book. This can be a bit of a problem with some games where they present game background, which is actually kind of redundant in the face of online wikis and so on, but having in the book is still useful. But yeah, I review the books as they're presented to me as a consumer, right? On the book, not anything else around it. And similar with Candela Obscura and Blades in the Dark and things like that. Someone brought me up on getting the rules wrong on Blades in the Dark, but I put some of that down to how poorly presented the rules were, which is a common problem with a lot of these narrative games, and it doesn't actually materially change my criticism. It's still far too easy to succeed in those kind of games. Right, moving on the Dangerous Dungeons idea. Random user, at least their username is hidden, says, as long as the pieces aren't written just for shock value, I'd be happy to pay for such a project. Sadly, I agree it likely won't happen. Right, so this is the idea of doing kind of Dangerous Visions, but for RPGs, as in doing a collection of adventures that deals with mature, taboo, and difficult subjects. Of course, we have to figure out what genuinely is a taboo these days and what isn't. And it presents all kinds of challenges and problems for publishing it, making money, so on, getting people to be involved in the project. And the success of the project, I feel, would hinge on getting known names to write material from it and to be willing to have their names associated with it and to promote it. So there's a lot of hurdles in the way. So I was really presenting it as an idea that I have of something I would like to do, but which I don't think is possible. I wasn't really sounding people out as to whether they wanted it or not. As for shock value, who's to tell? So, what is purely shock value to one person may have value outside shock value to somebody else. Right? This is often the problem I run into with my work, because there is usually subtext, which people aren't terribly good at figuring out these days, at least not if they come at something determined to be upset by it. So, plus I think you have to have the room to approach these kinds of subjects and fuck up without it destroying you. So that's a whole other issue. So yeah, I would prefer, if I did go ahead with such a project, that people would come at the subject, come at the topics with maturity and skill, but there's nothing actually wrong with shock value as such. And I don't know what possible objective criterion you could use to differentiate stuff that's just for the shock value and stuff that's just shocking. Dreamer Kuma says, I disagree on one part. It doesn't need multiple big names. It needs a larger name to collate and edit the thing. Well, that too, probably. And probably I'm not big enough. Notorious enough, yes. Big enough, probably not. Probably put off as many people as I attracted. Let's wrap with the Kalergi plan. Because they're back. They're back strongly and in greater numbers, like sand people, ironically enough. I don't know. Well, no, I do know what has stirred them up, but they did go quiet for a couple of weeks, really, relatively speaking. But now I am bedeviled on every side by pseudo-intellects and extremely dull people who can't stick to the topic or stick to a single subject and die in a fire. Diesel Fiend says, this is what black and white absolutism looks like, as if this dude knows anything about much of anything. His sources are no different than ours. Lol. They are just as subjective, just as prone to mis- and disinformation as anyone or anything. He's virtue signalling to the establishment that he's willing to fall in line. Yeah, I certainly look like a pro-establishment guy, don't I? My entire history doesn't contradict that in any way, shape, or form. Also, I do have qualifications relating to history and politics and even communication studies, all of which gives me skills on interpreting and assessing political information, historical information, media information. So the problem you're having is that your arguments aren't convincing. You have swallowed propaganda and nonsense and quite amateurish versions thereof, and everything you believe is childishly easy to debunk. The hard part is convincing you that you've been debunked. Jai Sump says, I'm new to finding this out. Playing devil's advocate. Whilst Kalergi had an ideal but no actual plan, are there others actually putting this ideal into an action plan? If so, who are they and what's the evidence? There is no evidence. There is no conspiracy. Nobody is doing anything. People are doing what people always seem to do. We seem to have this mental flaw where we think there has to be intention, human action behind something, and we believe that a cause has to be in the same sort of league as its effect. So for some people who are suffering from cognitive bias, they see the demographics shifting around them, or a whole bunch of refugees or whatever being housed in their area, and then they think, well, this must need a commensurate cause. Not, that there are wars around the world, not climate change making certain places less and less livable, not the same socio-economic factors that have always led to immigration and emigration, just sped up by modern technology and travel and everything. No, it must be an evil conspiracy. And then their brain falls out somehow. But yeah, there's nothing. Mustafa Bel Hussein, and that's probably a white person taking on an Arab name, to be honest. That seems to be a common tactic amongst the far right. They will adopt foreign-sounding names and then make posts all over the place being as horrible as possible. Not that online Islamists are much better. But anyway, Mustafa, in inverted commas, says, Lamau, too much. I went to Paris and all white women were either with, well, he says was an Arab or a black. I doubt that very much, and even if so what? As I believe I said in that video, it has been years. People have attraction to the exotic, the different. So why shouldn't they? Plus, those cultures tend to be a bit more forward about approaching women, so that might have something to do with it. But, who cares? So what? It's not some evil plan. It's just people individually acting as people. Mr. Sentence Name, who has been a particularly dogged retard on these comments, says, do us a favour and look up the history of eugenics. I am intimately aware of the history of eugenics. They are not only degrading the idea of the nation-state itself. The nation-state is a relatively new idea. I don't know why you're so wedded to it. But culture as well. They are importing voters. No. And obedient people. Nope. To help them in a controlled collapse. Nope. A collapse serves nobody. This is all very clear. No, it isn't. It's also a long-term eugenics program. Ironic, you don't seem to understand what eugenics is. To make a one European race, so we're not divided on racial lines either. Kalergi suggested that perhaps people would interbreed to a massive extent, as we always have, as humanity always has. Just ask the Picts. Oh, you can't, but they're part of all of us. Yeah, he said this was likely to happen, but naturally, over time, due to better communication, better travel, and so on. So its prediction is not a plan. If I toss a coin and I say heads and it lands on heads, that doesn't mean that there was some colossal scheme in the background ensuring that it landed on heads. Right? I want to create a Euro state with a central government. I want us to be dependent on this super state to live. That wouldn't be so bad if they did, but alas, they don't. And Britain has fucked itself by divorcing from the European collaboration, unfortunately, and look how well that's done for us. Do they want to make people dependent on the state? No, but is it such a bad thing if a state actually does good things for its citizens? No, it isn't. Double Check says, funny how when I search about Kalergi, there's a multitude of websites saying it's all fake. There's also a lot of people who argue that the Earth is not flat. What does that tell you? Does that mean the Earth is flat because so many people are dedicated to fighting against that stupidity? No, of course not. Goes on. Yet in the West, the citizens have been brainwashed into believing that the state provides and not God. No God has ever produced anything or provided anything for anybody. The state is at least real, actual, has genuine temporal power, and provided you live in a suitably democratic state that you can hold to account, what's so bad about that helping people? Providing education, medical care, all of the other things that are better conducted on that level. So they think they can only afford one or two children. That's not so you think you can only afford one or two children, and in fact state intervention and welfare is often what makes the difference in people being able to support children. Why are a lot of the organisations behind the mass immigration Israeli? Well, there is no mass immigration. There's no organisations behind mass immigration, and those organisations involved in immigration aren't Israeli. That said, maybe an ethnicity of people that have suffered from pogroms and have been refugees and so on for much of their history, maybe they would have a good reason for being invested in that sort of organisational structure. Just, off the top of my head. These shills only dig their own graves. Then sub if you hate TikTok and Reddit. Don't sub to this person. Says WEF propaganda. Should probably do a video on the World Economic Forum at some point, but the short version is it's just another group of rich people having meetings and coming up with ideas. They don't direct anything, they don't rule anything, they don't directly shape policy for anything. It's a think tank. That's really it. Nothing sinister about it. There's no agenda to force you to marry a black woman or whatever. You can rest assured that the wank sock will continue to suffice for you. Oh man, fuck these people. Zang.
I don't wanna drown.